Did Adolf Hitler really die in a bunker in Berlin in 1945? We're here to talk about it. This is Aliens and Stuff.
Hi and welcome to episode 11 of Aliens and Stuff. I'm Spencer, this is Tom and Mike. And remember to click subscribe and the bell icon. So we've got a real special episode for you coming up today. What are we talking about, Mike?
Well, this is an interesting one, Spencer. The question that we're asking is, did Adolf Hitler really die in the Berlin bunker in 1945?
Wow, big topic.
Completely unrelated to aliens or anything we've done kind of in the past. We've obviously, in episode 10, talked about kind of Nazi tech and all that kind of stuff. And I want to say as well, a bit of a disclaimer, Nazis are not cool. We think they're scumbags, but you need to discuss this kind of thing. To make sure in history that it's catalogued what they did.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the last episode, if you don't pay attention to what's happened in history, you're just going to be doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So Nazis suck. Nazis are dumb. Let's get talking about Nazis.
Hitler particularly, which is who we're talking about today. So I'm going to give everyone a bit of a background on the last few days of World War II.
Okay.
1945, okay?
Write it down.
Particularly April and May. So at this point, the Germans or the Nazis were losing really, really badly.
Yeah.
The Allies were absolutely dominating. So you had the US and the UK and other allies coming in from the West. And you had the Soviets coming in from the east. Now, by the end of April, okay, and early May 1945, they were in Germany, descending on Berlin.
Yeah.
Okay. Hitler knew this. Now, at the time, we talk about the psyche of the guy. He was completely off his face. I mean, completely off his face on meth, on prescription medication for stomach problems that he had.
Well,
Opioids, wasn't it? Opioids. There was a lot of opioids.
Yeah,
we did say, didn't we, in the last
opioids.
episode about the advancements the Nazis made in meth. So
They made a huge advancements in meth, and Hitler took full advantage of that.
As did Walter White.
As did Walter White, exactly. So
different context.
they were descending on him. He, at this point, was in his bunker in central Berlin, okay, which is an underground bunker. And he was surrounded by a very much inner circle at this point. These people included the likes of Eva Braun, who was his long-term mistress,
Yes.
and his secretary, Martin Bormann. Okay? Now, I'm going to come back to Hitler later on in this, because I think setting the scene about what was happening in the world at this time is important to the rest of the story. So, a bit random, but I'm going to talk about Argentina.
Okay.
Okay? Now, if you talk about the politics that went on during World War II, who supported who, okay? Argentina were one of the biggest supporters of Nazi Germany, okay? The reason being is that the majority of their descendants, I suppose, or their relatives were of Italian, Spanish, or German descent, okay? Now, during the war, Italy, Spain, who were neutral in all fairness, and obviously Germany, were all in on it together, okay? Yeah. So Mussolini of Italy, obviously massive supporter, and obviously Italian troops fought during the war. Spain with Franco, who's another dictator, was actually classed as neutral, but they kind of had that ideology that Hitler shared during the war as well. Some Germans actually did hold high positions, okay, in Argentinian government.
Okay.
Some quite high-level Nazis, believe it or not, held positions like foreign minister and things like that.
Oh,
okay. And there was quite a few that came over and things like that.
When you say what they were members of the Nazi Party, but
yes.
Oh, okay, right.
Okay. Juan Perón.
Right.
I'm terrible at pronunciations, as we know from previous episodes.
We've established that.
We have established that, Tom, thank you. But Juan Perón,
So
who was the Argentinian Prime Minister at the time, him and his wife really, really admired Hitler. Okay? Really kind of, they were fanboying girling after him, properly.
Posters in bedrooms and...
Exactly, and a lot of Hitler's entourage, and the Nazi Party actually helped fund a lot of his campaign and a lot of stuff that he was doing in Argentina as a result. So that gives you a background on Argentina and why they were supporting Germany. So after the war and obviously the Allies closing in, a lot of high-level Nazis from the party and SS officers and people like that were escaping or trying to escape out of Europe to other areas of the world where they weren't going to get captured by the Allies and tried.
Yeah.
So a lot escaped on routes called, what they called at the time, rat runs. Okay. Now, through Europe, out of Germany, depending on where they were as well, like some of them could have been in Poland or France or whatever, they escaped, some of them through Italy, okay, then across to Spain, either by boat or by U-boat or by plane, and then across the Atlantic, down south to South America, okay. Some entered kind of through Brazil and some others just went direct straight to Argentina, okay. Now, believe it or not, some went from Germany into Italy, into Rome, and a lot of the Catholic Church at the time and the Vatican actually assisted escaping Nazis.
No.
Honestly, from Central
The
Europe.
Vatican?
The Vatican, the Catholic Church assisted in helping them escape. They did that via
Whoops.
into the Vatican,
Blasphemy.
down into Genoa, and then out through the Mediterranean. A lot of them went down as far as...
Why did they help them?
I think it was Mussolini, because obviously Mussolini, the great dictator, he is a fascist. I think he'd only fallen months earlier, and I think a lot of them still shared his ideologies, or were just, that was the mentality in Italy back then. You can't blame them necessarily for their mentality back then. It's only in history that I think these kind of bad decisions have kind of come out. So, but I just thought it was an interesting point to state that
I would say,
the Catholic
yeah.
Church certainly did do that. Certainly, you know, not a reflection on them in this modern day. Now, they obviously went out through the Med, maybe down to the Canary Islands, which are obviously part of Spain as they are today still,
Love
and
the
then
Canary
across
Islands.
to the South America as well. Okay, so that's how high-level Nazis used to escape from Europe,
Right.
and that's well documented.
Yeah.
Nazis that have been found over history have actually explained how they got out and things like that. Okay, I'm going to go back to Hitler now, right? So, in the bunker, he was sat there, knowing full well he was losing, off his face on opioids and meth. He loved meth, right? Absolutely loved the meth. And he was in his bunker with Eva Braun on the 1st of May 1945. Now, this is the official story, okay, that came out, and this is the one that most of us hear about.
This is the
Is that, yeah, so he allegedly committed suicide using either a combination of a cyanide pill, which came up before in a previous episode that we did, and then he shot himself in the head. And it looks as if Eva Braun, who was with him, did something quite similar to that. Okay. Now, the bodies were then carried upstairs out of the bunker, and they were buried in a shallow grave near the bunker. They were covered in 50 litres of petrol and then burned. Now, we've actually got a picture of that to bring up, okay? This is obviously not at the time. This is after the Soviets have then taken the Battle of Berlin. And so as you can see, some Soviet-looking and some potentially Allied-looking men there actually standing around the alleged shallow grave where Hitler had been, and Eva Braun had been put.
Well, you can see the petrol canisters in the corner.
You can,
there,
yeah,
can't you?
and that's why they say two 25-litre, you know, canisters, 50 litres of petrol poured over them. They were set alight, okay? Now, this is where it becomes a little bit iffy, because they announced his death first on German radio, publicly.
Okay.
This is where they announced that he had died.
The well-oiled propaganda machine.
Well, this is the point, because this is the kind of clue where something wasn't quite right about it. This is the first thing that comes out about it, because Germany back in those times, with Joseph Goebbels in charge, had one of the most effective propaganda machines that this world has ever seen. The propaganda that they were putting out ranged from something menial like going to the cinema to, you know, papers, newspapers, radio.
Yeah.
That's how they used to get information out, and it was all misinformation as well.
Is Goebbels the one they used to call the poison dwarf?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he was apparently a very eloquent man. You know,
Just
really,
pure evil.
Just pure evil guy. Horrible bloke. But that's where it kind of seems a bit strange that they would announce it first on German radio. The Nazis announced it first on German radio. Okay. Now, the Allies weren't... This allegedly happened, as I say, on the 1st of May 1945. The Allies, in other words, the Soviets, who were the first people to get to the bunker in Berlin, they weren't actually able to verify that this had happened until the next day, which is the 2nd of May 1945. Okay. Some say the 2nd, some say it's the 3rd. There's a crossover somewhere there. Okay. Now, they actually went into the bunker itself, and they actually found what they thought was Hitler, dead, with a bullet in his head. So they brought him out, a guy that looked like Hitler, brought him out onto the front of the steps, and I have looked for this picture. I cannot find it anywhere. Okay. I've tried and tried, but I cannot find it. And they paraded him in front of cameras on the steps of his bunker, a guy that looked like Hitler, you know, that moustache, wearing his uniform, what he would do, dead, shot in the head. Okay. They then found out very, very quickly that this was a really, really bad body double. Right. Really bad. And it was quite obvious.
Didn't even have a mustache.
I mean, even if you don't have everyone knows what Hitler looks like. Even if you had a very poor knowledge of history, you'd look at this guy and say, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's almost like saying, oh, you're Tom. That's how ridiculous it was.
We have convinced people that we're brothers before.
Yeah, brothers from another mate.
Mate, well, there we go. But it was ridiculous anyway, okay? So that was quickly debunked, okay, even by the Soviets themselves. Now, no one was actually able to verify Hitler's death in 1945, other than the radio, and then other Nazi witnesses that had said, oh, yeah, he shot himself and we buried him around the corner, okay?
Right.
Now, they actually took, from that shallow grave, what we just showed there, back to Russia, or the Soviet Republic, two bodies, but they recovered part of the skull, which was allegedly Hitler. And again, we've got a picture of that here. Okay. Now, they had no DNA capabilities at the time in 1945, and for quite a lot of years after the war. It just didn't exist, this technology. Okay. So they thought, this is Hitler's remnants, we'll keep hold of that. You know, and they kept that in the Kremlin for a number of years. The FBI had a lot of documents on Hitler and talked about different things, and they were kept classified for years and years. J. Edgar Hoover, for example, was one of the people that actually looked into Hitler's death. Okay. Now, the Soviets did such a bad job with the crime scene, they didn't have much to work with, hence just that fragment of bone from his skull. But they did also actually find a jawbone from Hitler as well, which we've also got a picture of. Now, very shortly after the war, they talked to Hitler's personal dentist and the dentist team, like the technicians and people like that, who verified that's him. That's his from his dental records, that's Hitler's jawbone.
Right.
Okay. Now, this is where it will blow your mind. When they did DNA testing on that fragment of skull years later, and this was only done maybe like 15 years ago, and I think it's been done recently as well, they found that that fragment of bone was in fact a woman under the age of 40.
Wow.
Not Hitler at all.
So, so you were saying were there two bodies then? There was one that was burnt and then one that was shot, or was the
shot
one?
They were both burnt.
What about the one that was paraded?
That was
shot, paraded, and then burnt.
No, shot, paraded, but the actual body was allegedly burnt.
So no, let me explain. So Hitler himself, they said, was shot in the bunker, shot himself in the bunker, and they took him out and buried him in a shallow grave.
Right.
Okay. They found actually a body double in there that looked like Hitler, which they brought outside, had been shot in the head, not burnt at all.
So there are two bodies.
Yeah. So the one that was a body double was easily debunked by the Soviets themselves a couple of days later. Said, no, it's definitely not Hitler.
And then the other body doesn't hold up to DNA.
Well, from
evidence.
The witnesses, they said, oh, Hitler was taken out of it, put in the shallow pit and burnt.
Right.
That's what they took home, because back to Russia with them is what they thought was Hitler and Eva Braun. And they tested them both in the end and found that they were both women. One of them was under 40.
What about the jawbone?
So that's never been explained, but I'll come on to that a little bit later as to why theories as to why his physicist, his dentist, said what he said.
Do we still have the jawbone?
The jawbone still exists, yeah.
Cannot surely retest that?
I don't know. I've got no idea. But that could be, easily retested, I would have said. Now, going on to Hitler's alleged escape now, which is the question that we're asking. Did Adolf Hitler really die in the Berlin bunker in 1945? There is a lot of theories about this online, okay, a lot. And I've tried to pull together information from all of them to give an idea of, or build a picture, and what I think is probably the most logical idea. So Martin Bormann, who I brought up earlier in the episode, Adolf Hitler's absolutely fanatical secretary, probably out of all of the high-level Nazis that we've talked about in other episodes and stuff like that, he was the most fanatical of this Nazi ideology. He was his right-hand man, his best friend.
Right.
Okay. It was himself, it was Hitler, and it was Eva Braun, and there was one other person, Heinrich Müller, who was in that bunker in Berlin towards the end of the war. Now, it is alleged that Martin Bormann took it upon himself to protect Hitler at the end because Hitler was so high on meth, because he loved meth, right? Completely out of his mind, didn't know what was going on. So Martin Bormann took it on his shoulders to essentially swap out Eva Braun and Hitler and replace them with 2 body doubles. This goes back to what the Soviets found, this dead body double that was in the bunker.
And I know from talking to you before, body doubles was a big thing back then.
Body doubles was huge.
Yeah.
Churchill had 6 body doubles.
Wow, okay.
Didn't people like Saddam Hussein had quite a few, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a load. Stalin, who was obviously the Soviet leader at the time, he had 16 body doubles. It was a well-known thing that happened during the war at that time, is that world leaders had body doubles because of the danger of being in world wars. So it's not out there to believe that Hitler had them as well.
Yeah,
They're known to have done as well. There's other events where it's known that someone else has turned up to an event instead of Hitler, and it's quite clearly, obviously, not him. Now, this is where it gets a bit speculative, but there's quite a lot of evidence as well to back this up.
Okay.
So what it's alleged is actually on the 21st of April 1945, so again, like over a week before the 1st of May, which is when he allegedly killed himself and Eva Braun, okay, that he left the bunker via some underground tunnels in Berlin. Now, we know they exist. There's 90 miles of underground tunnels in Berlin,
right, yeah.
and they all interconnect with each other. He allegedly left by aeroplane, okay, from the airport in Berlin, and there is a direct route from the bunker underground to the airport. Part of that tunnel is filled in now, but they've done a lot of work, actually, seismic work.
Where the subway station is, isn't it?
It's where the subway station is,
goes to the airport.
Correct.
Yeah.
So between the subway station and the airport, there's now a tunnel that's filled in, but they know it was there. Okay, and he left to right at the edge of the runway and got on a plane, and off he went. Now, interestingly, a number of eyewitnesses didn't see Hitler, but at the time, 2 German soldiers were told on that particular day, 21st of April 1945, to not shoot at any plane that comes out of that airport. That's rare, because the Allies were bombing the hell out of Berlin at this point because they were closing in. It's the Battle of Berlin was happening. It was well underway.
So you would have thought they'd be like, shoot anything that comes near.
Well, the German Air Force was completely finished by this point. The Luftwaffe was completely gone.
Okay.
They'd completely beaten them already in the Battle of Britain and then beyond, okay? So it was rare to see any plane take off from Germany at this point. And they were told in no uncertain terms, do not shoot this plane down. Now, where did it go? Now, we're going back to what I said earlier in the episode now about the rat runs. Now, allegedly, and this is another eyewitness, he went to a monastery which was actually known to harbour Nazis. Now, this guy basically witnessed seeing Hitler in May of 1945.
Okay.
So after, obviously, he left on the 21st, he went and then got into May. He stayed in this monastery near Vigo. The guy that saw him was there for the reason that he was digging tunnels out of the monastery under the walls of the compound to a building down the street that was owned by Franco, who's the Spanish Prime Minister.
And the sympathiser to...
Yeah, and a sympathiser to Hitler's cause, although allegedly neutral.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, he was building tunnels under the monastery. They've since found those tunnels and corroborated his story.
Okay.
So they do exist.
Right.
Now, this guy said that he saw Hitler, okay, walking through kind of some of the corridors of the monastery, but he didn't have his well-known moustache anymore.
Okay.
Okay, he's in plain clothes, didn't have a tash, but he knew it was him. He was one of the most memorable guys in the world at that time on propaganda, etc. He also saw a German plane. Now, it wasn't tagged German. There was no swastikas or flags or anything like that on it. But it was he knew about planes, this guy, for some unknown reason. he knew it was a German manufactured plane.
Not a lot of variation back then, I would imagine.
I don't think so,
yeah.
not hugely.
You could tell what was German built and what
And
wasn't.
as we were saying in the last episode, you know, Germany was at the height of technology at the
Exactly.
time. You know, they were obviously always been very good at manufacturing and engineering.
Yeah.
So it would go without saying. I mean,
100%.
anyway, yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Now, he spoke to the farmer who he knew was a potato farmer. This plane was in a potato farmer's field.
Right.
Okay? Now, the farmer also told him that he saw Hitler himself get off that plane and that it was Hitler's plane. Okay? Which backed up what he thought and what he saw in the monastery himself when he said
Yeah.
he saw Hitler in the corridors. So that kind of reaffirmed what he thought he'd seen.
He's seen him and someone else has seen him.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And then from there, the plane took off in that potato field. How it did that, I don't know, and I don't have any details about whether that was laid out as a runway or whether it was just the plane
No,
was
it'd be a
set up.
field, wouldn't it? So it'd be. I don't think.
Potatoes
it'd
are
be-
underground, aren't they? So
A lot of airfields in the war, even the British ones, were just fields.
yeah,
You know that.
it
Okay.
was a different time.
Now, where did he go is the next question, the question that we're now asking after the Berlin incident. We know how he got out of Berlin, and there's a lot of proof behind that. Where did he actually go after Berlin? Now, a lot of Nazis on these rat runs, as we talk about, went on from Spain, you know, Germany to Spain to the Canary Islands, which is obviously part of Spain. A lot of people have talked about Fuerteventura, which is obviously
Okay.
one of the Canary Islands, which is where Hitler went. And then obviously they alleged said he got a U-boat from there. But where did he actually go? And there's a lot of theories about this, and I'm going to go through some of them first. I'm going to go through the one that I don't think is the case.
Okay.
And people watching might not agree with me here. Please leave a comment if you think that you do.
Is it the moon?
I'm not even going to discuss the moon.
So for anyone who doesn't know, there's many theories about Nazi moon bases and maybe Hitler escaped and went to the moon. I don't really buy into that. I don't know about you
If
guys.
they had the technology to do that, they wouldn't have lost the war.
Yeah,
Yeah,
If they were
frankly.
in the middle of constructing bases on the moon, mate, they wouldn't have lost the war.
ridiculous.
100%.
Complete conspiracy theory, nothing to back
It's
it.
cool though. If it was true, awesome.
It is cool, but no.
It's not true.
It's not true. It's not
Absolutely ridiculous. Sending a guy who's completely off his face on meth to the moon.
You're really into the meth thing, aren't you?
Mate, it's hilarious.
true. Are you fiending?
No. But anyway, one of the places that I want to discuss is Antarctica.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
This area of the world is not claimed by any particular country. It's the only place on Earth it isn't, right?
All right.
To get to.
Now, an historian called Douglas Dietrich, okay, talked about how the Nazis built a colony on the South Pole that could house up to 200,000 people.
Is there any evidence?
Well, I'm coming on to that, Tom.
Size of Plymouth.
Exactly,
Yeah.
size of Plymouth. So that's a big place.
Yeah,
you
Plymouth's
know.
big.
And it would be a cold place.
You talk about Austria, okay? Now, there is tunnels in Austria that exist
Right.
that are over 1 million square metres and they can house up to 60,000 people. That does exist. People walk through them. So it's nothing to say that the Nazis couldn't create something that houses 200,000 people.
But in Antarctica.
Exactly.
How
so I'm
would you
coming
get
on
all
to
the
that.
kit and equipment up there?
Now, this is fact. In 1938, the Nazis did send a team to the South Pole. That did happen.
Right.
But they went there on the proviso of scientific purposes. But the most hilarious thing about it, they sent the buffoon that is Hermann Goering.
Right.
Now, if anyone's seen this guy, okay, complete narcissist and had a real belief in himself, but he was head of the Luftwaffe,
Right.
the head of the German Air Force. He's like the least scientific guy you're ever going to see. So why did he lead a scientific expedition to the South Pole on behalf of the Nazis?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay,
Do you have the answer?
so they wanted to allegedly take the land because no one else had it.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right, okay. Now, a top-ranking Nazi also claimed that they wanted to have a base there in 1943. All right. So Admiral Dönitz, who is a commander of the U-boat fleet,
Right.
okay, he claimed, and this is a quote again, an impregnable fortress in another part of the world that he had built for Hitler. That's, again, paraphrasing, but,
Right. Yeah.
you know. Now, some people believe that that was actually Greenland, so that was in the north, the
Right.
northern hemisphere. But conspiracy theorists believe that, and I can't, there is nothing that backs this up, but since he left Spain, we heard that he might have gone from the Canary Islands down south somewhere by U-boat.
Right.
And a lot of people believe that 2 U-boats left from the Canary Islands to go to Antarctica. There is nothing that backs this up
Right.
whatsoever.
All hearsay.
All hearsay.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to tell you why I don't think that this is true and why I don't believe that these U-boats went to Antarctica. So as we know, the Germans went there in 1939 with the intention of putting a base in there. But in 1943 and 1945, the British actually launched a secret wartime Antarctic operation codenamed Tambourine, and men from the SS were involved in there during World War II and then afterwards as well. In July and August 1945, after the German surrender, again, this is alleged, 2 U-boats arrived in Argentina, okay? And were they going there to get treasure, or were they going there to hide, or whatever? Who knows? That's what allegedly happened. Now, in the summer of 1946 and 1947, and this is where it gets ridiculous, the US Navy, okay, basically invaded Antarctica. They sent 13 really high-class ships down to Antarctica.
Like battleships?
Battleships.
Right.
Now, the operation was codenamed High Jump and was extremely classified. It was classified for years and years after the war. Okay. Now, in 1958, 3 nuclear weapons were exploded in the region. 3 nuclear weapons, as you do. And that's another separate classified US operation codenamed Argus.
Okay.
Now, given the initial information about these activities and the fact that these particular kind of expeditions were classified for quite a few years after the war, it does raise questions in people's mind, normal people's minds like us of the time, of what really happened, or did Hitler go there, or is there a large mythical German base? Okay. Now, using the knowledge of Antarctica and concerning these activities have been published since the early 1940s, it actually demonstrates that 2 U-boats could not have actually reached Antarctica at all. It's impossible because there was such a heavy presence of Allied forces in the area at the time. They just couldn't have gone there.
Right.
Because there was too many people in the
so
area.
So what, they would have, if they tried to go down there, they would have encountered a battleship.
There was like 13 US battleships. There was British expedition down there at the time. There was no way they could have gone there.
They would have bumped into somebody.
They would have bumped into somebody. Okay. Now, it actually turns out after these operations were declassified later, and we now know that actually Operation High Jump was actually a operation to train US forces how to fight in Arctic conditions in case of a Cold War, during the Cold War.
Right.
Okay. And actually the Operation Argus, which was to blow up the 3 nuclear bombs, that actually happened 2,000 kilometres north of Antarctica.
Okay.
So again, no way it could have happened whatsoever. But you can see why people at the time thought that Hitler could have gone there in a
Well, if
U-boat.
they were classified projects and people wouldn't have known that there would have been such a mighty force of previous allies in the area.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You know, he just couldn't have gone there. And why would he have done, knowing that there was such a presence down there as well?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
No.
So that's why I am debunking Antarctica completely, parking it, throwing it behind the sofa.
Regardless of that, I think a base in Antarctica doesn't make any sense. You'd have to bring so many resources in.
Yeah, true.
And even if you could, I don't know, live off the land or, drill for oil or what have you, you'd have to bring so many materials in on so many ships.
Which 2 U-boats probably wouldn't be able to...
Thousands of U-boats, because U-boats aren't very big. It's just not practical.
It's not practical. It's difficult to do. They would have been seen doing it.
It's an unrealistic scenario.
It's an unrealistic scenario, especially when...
It's a cool scenario.
It's a very cool scenario. Like the moon.
Cold.
It's very cool, but it's complete
Yeah.
nonsense, in my opinion. So that brings in now, why would they do that in the southern hemisphere when they had allies such as Argentina, who we've already talked about, Perón, very good friends of the Germans, okay? Now, there is a lot of conflicting reports as to where Hitler actually was in Argentina, okay? There's a lot of people that have come forward, there's been a lot of sightings of him. They've also spoken to a lot of other Nazis, which we know...
I imagine he would have moved around anyway, wouldn't he?
Well, this is it, and I'm going to come on to that as well. It's just difficult to build a timeline. Okay, so I've tried to build a timeline of sorts with theories. Now, it's alleged that Hitler arrived in Argentina first, staying in the, and again, my pronunciation is going to come in, the Hacienda San Ramon. Okay?
That's better than I could have done.
There we go.
Sounds pretty good.
Pretty good, isn't it? So Hitler then moved, after he went to that place, He then went on to a Bavarian-style mansion, which we've seen in Argentina a lot, German architecture, in Alco, okay, which is a remote part of Argentina in the kind of northwest side of the country on the border with Chile near a lake.
Okay.
Now, this is what one historian believes, just from speaking to people in the area and speaking to people that have seen him, that in 1954, 9 years after the war, so we've been there 9 years,
Right.
Eva Braun, who had allegedly had died with him in the bunker, was still with him, and she left Hitler.
Okay.
And she moved to another part of Argentina with their daughter called Ursula.
And who reported this?
This is a particular historian
Right.
that had allegedly spoken to people who had spoken to people who claimed that they had seen Hitler, they know of him, they know of high-level Nazis in the area.
And this is
Okay.
Argentina.
And this is in Argentina.
Right, okay.
And then after that, Hitler then died in February 1962. Now, the historians have massively rejected that.
Okay.
Because there's this lack of evidence, except for I saw him.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Purely anecdotal.
Yeah, completely
Yeah.
anecdotal. There is another theory as well in an area called Misiones in Argentina. Okay, they found in some woods. It's always woods, isn't it?
Always woods.
Always woods.
They found a kind of homestead of like 3 different properties. Okay, these houses had European features, like Bavarian style features, as it were. Like they were talking about the porches and stuff. That wasn't something that they had architecturally in Argentina at that
Right.
time. Not to say that people in this country don't try and recreate Mediterranean-looking houses. Even within the UK, we don't have those types of houses, so that could be completely nonsense again. But they found a lot of things in the house which suggested that Hitler was there. Now, the things that they found were, when they excavated this partially demolished house, they found known drugs that Hitler had been using. Meth. Well, no, it wasn't just the meth that made them think it, because you would find meth in a derelict house, wouldn't you?
I don't know.
Well, in
a
Argentina-
Bavarian-style mansion in Argentina.
Yeah, was
In the middle
Okay.
of nowhere.
meth rife in Argentina?
Maybe not, but they found it. They also found drugs for his known stomach problem that he had.
Okay.
Okay. Now this is where it gets interesting. They found a lot of tinned food. There wasn't really much fresh, which there wouldn't be because it was years later. But they found a lot of tinned food, and they found that a lot of the tinned food that they found were known favourites of Hitler's. So food that he really did enjoy.
German-style vegetarian dishes.
Maybe.
Pea
But-
soup, apparently.
Was he was a
big fan.
vegetarian,
pea
wasn't
soup?
he?
It was,
Was he?
yeah,
Was he a
massive
vegetarian?
fan of pea soup.
Did not know
Apparently,
that.
he had terrible flatulence. I
Makes
can't remember where
sense,
that comes
really.
from, but no, apparently he had stomach problems. He had such bad gas. That's what I've heard.
The next 2 things are the ones for me that really corroborate the story as being
this is true.
sorry, pea soup. You've ruined it.
No, pea soup, and he had bad gas. Sorry.
Bad gas. We like gas.
Better out than in.
Terrible. Nazi coins they
Right.
found in this house with the emblems on there.
Oh, with the eagle.
Yeah. They found a lot of Nazi coins as well.
Ooh.
Okay. Remembering Hitler at this time was known or thought to be one of the, probably the richest man in the world at this point. They thought that he had,
Okay.
through stuff that he'd taken from people, amassed wealth close to $100 billion. It's a
Jeez.
lot. Okay. So we had the resources to pull
Is that in
something like
today's
this off.
money?
That's in today's money.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, okay.
Okay. Yeah,
gonna
not
say.
then. God, then it would be worth crazy amounts.
Because that isn't.
Because the scumbag he was, he stole all this off people.
Oh, yeah,
And
it's
that's
a lot
how
of
he
art,
amassed
wasn't
as
it?
well.
Lot
These
of
are,
art.
are they Reichsmarks?
Yeah.
Before they became Deutschmarks.
The other
Yeah.
thing that he found in this house were a photo of Hitler and Mussolini, who obviously leader of Italy,
Yeah.
walking to have a common conversation,
That's a bit weird.
which is strange. All right. Now, also in the same area of Argentina, this is the Misiones, there is an alleged photo of Hitler that was taken in 1961, okay? I'm going to throw that up on the screen, actually, because
Oh, my God.
I've done a lot of research. I can't work out which one it was in 1961 that was allegedly taken. I think it was the top one. I don't necessarily believe that that is Hitler in the bottom picture. Knowing Hitler's thoughts on people's race, obviously horrible opinions he had of other
Other creeds
skin
and
colour
colours,
and
yeah.
creeds and colours. But the top one, yes, it does look like him on the left. The nose shape, he obviously doesn't have the moustache. The ears look very, very similar.
I was looking at the ears.
Yeah,
That's
that-
interesting.
That, and he does look aged as well compared to where he was in 1945, which is the one that was on the right. Now, this photo was allegedly taken of Hitler in that same area of Argentina in 1961. Okay, which is quite interesting.
Okay.
This next bit will blow your mind, in my opinion, because this really now starts to put meat on the bone of evidence of him in Argentina.
Okay.
Philip Citron, okay, didn't even try and put a French accent on for that. Philip Citron, he approached, okay, the CIA in October 3rd, 1955, and he highlights claims made by so he himself, Philip Citron, was a former German SS trooper, okay, and he claimed that Hitler was still alive and that he left Colombia for Argentina in January 1955. Okay. Now, enclosed with the document was an alleged photograph of Citron and the person that claimed to be Hitler. And on the back of the photo, it was written, Adolf Schuttelmeyer. The second page, obviously, is a description. It's longer than that, but the bit that we want to get onto on the third line on the left there, that Adolf Hitler is still alive. Citron actually worked for the Royal Dutch Shipping Company, and that's how he kept coming into connection with it. And again, there's the picture from 55 with Philip Citron on the left and this, well, alleged, okay, Adolf Schuttelmeyer on the right.
He's still got a moustache though, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, but he could grow it back. So earlier we said about in Spain he was seen without a moustache. He could have grown it back.
Could have.
Look how many times Spencer's changed his look during 11 episodes.
I know, but when you're known for having one and you're probably the most wanted man in history, I think you'd just be like, I'll do without the tash.
I think if history, but if the consensus is that you're dead,
no one's looking for you,
and no one's looking for you, and you're in the middle of nowhere.
This is where it gets strange again. So Hitler's alleged presence in Colombia was apparently an open secret in some circles, according to Citron. A subsequent CIA investigation found that in a city overpopulated with former German Nazis, and that's a quote from there, the former SS officer told an agency source that Schuttelmeyer was idolised by those who knew his real identity, and they called him Der Führer. They called him Der Führer.
Right.
Okay? And not
suspect at all then there.
And a lot of them also honoured him with the old-style Nazi salutes.
Right.
Which I'm not going to do because it's disgraceful.
Cool.
Now, the report also states that neither the contact who reported his conversations with Citron, the CIA guy, nor the CIA station, this is in Colombia, were in a position to give an intelligent evaluation of the information, and the station's chief superiors told him that an enormous effort could be made to expand on this matter with remote possibilities of establishing anything concrete. So they dropped the investigation.
So they did nothing.
They did nothing.
They didn't go out there and say, "Give a word shuffle."
They were like, "We can't prove anything really if we investigate this any further. We're not going to investigate it."
What year was this?
That was in 1955.
Yeah. So I mean, no DNA testing. When did DNA testing come in? Do we know?
70s, 80s was it starting to appear?
Yeah. So
we should know that really.
It's a bit ridiculous in my opinion.
With all the war criminals that they did catch, though, that they'd be able to positively ID him, or
well, you think so? This is it, and we'll come on to that a bit later because
sorry.
No, that's fine. Another historian claimed as well that Hitler actually left Argentina for Paraguay and lived there inside an opulent underground bunker, which was turned into a hotel after he died in 1971. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. That's just a claim that somebody's made. Right?
No.
Ridiculous.
Okay.
Another researcher, and this is the more ridiculous one, before we come on to our discussion, claimed that Hitler went to Brazil hunting for buried treasure using a map given to his friends from the Vatican.
Given by his friends at the Vatican?
Yeah, the Vatican gave him a map with treasure, and he went searching for it in Brazil. The researcher was convinced that Hitler lived in the country until at least 1984, well into his 90s, because she had found a grainy photograph of an old man. She ran it through Photoshop and added a moustache to it, and it looked a bit like Hitler. I think that's complete nonsense, in my opinion.
There's a bloke that I see walking down the road near where I live all the time that looks a bit like Hitler. He's got a moustache and all. But do you know what I mean? That's that's nothing.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous fashion statement. So, all in all, I personally believe the Argentina theory, where he went in there is grainy, but the CIA stuff really does back a lot of that evidence up, from my opinion.
Well, I'll throw something in a minute.
Do you think Adolf Hitler really did die in the Berlin bunker in 1945?
Well, I mean, you're looking at... You go first, Tom, because I know you've got a lot to say about
I'm going
this.
to throw something in here, right?
Okay.
Because I knew you were going to go about the escape and all of the stuff that you went through, okay? So I did a little bit of research, and I found 7 examples of really high-end Nazi officials,
Yeah.
right? So Adolf Eichmann, okay?
Yeah.
The most, well, other than Hitler, was the most wanted Nazi, okay? He did escape to Argentina. We know he was in Argentina because the Israelis went in there in a
Mossad
covert
got him.
operation when they shouldn't have done, took him back to Israel, tried him, and then hung him.
Yeah.
Right? He was there,
There's a
okay?
film about that.
And this is a guy who is like seriously high up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
constantly meeting with Hitler, right?
He's one of the architects of the Holocaust, I understand, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he basically was in charge of setting up concentration camps, which was the murder of approximately 6 million people. Okay,
Scumbag.
pretty big deal when it comes to World War II. That guy.
Agreed.
Then it was Joseph Mengele, nicknamed the Angel of
Yeah,
Death.
he was
Right.
the experimenter, wasn't he?
Yeah, so
did
he
some
would basically
horrible things.
experiment on twins, pregnant women, and people with disabilities. And in one of the towns in Argentina, where he did generally live, there was a high population of twins.
Really?
Yeah. So whatever research he did, obviously,
this is what I mean,
he
we-
took it with him. So, which is interesting.
Well, there's reports, aren't there, about him collaborating with Unit 731, the Japanese experimentation.
But-
got
And,
called.
yeah, and
but
these
yeah.
aren't. I'm not talking about these were alleged they went to Argentina. No, they
They
were
were,
in
yeah.
Argentina.
Yeah.
Okay. Walter Ruff, an SS colonel, he was instrumental in making portable gas chambers. Mobile gas chambers, as they were known, and that was estimated 100,000 people were killed using those. Franz Stegali, maybe, I think his name is Stangel. Also nicknamed the White Death for his proclivity of wearing a white uniform and carrying a whip, killed those with mental and physical disabilities. And he was also in charge of running the multiple death camps.
And they caught all of these people out of Argentina?
Not all of them were caught, some had just lived to old age.
They just knew
No,
that they
they
were
caught
there.
a lot of them, but not all of them. A lot of them were tried like Nuremberg trials and bits.
But all in Argentina.
All in Argentina, right? Then there was Joseph Schwarzenberger.
Great, I like that.
Okay, we'll go with that. He was in
That's a
charge
good
of labour
pronunciation.
camps and the Jewish ghettos in Poland. Also brandished a horsewhip and had a German shepherd that was trained to attack people.
Wow, nice dog.
He was, in result, he was accounted for killing at least 500 people, 35 personally at gunpoint. He used to line them all up and shoot them in the back of the neck.
So scumbags, basically.
Absolutely.
And they did get to Argentina.
And the last one is Gerard Bonnet, or Bonnet maybe, B-O-H-N-E, Bon. Was a lawyer and SS officer. He carried systematic extermination in order to purify the area and race, and basically had different type of programs to, and basically infected Germans with incurable diseases, specialised in people with mental illnesses and other handicaps, and killed them all via gas chambers. Now my point is that those 7 people, they're not just, I was in the Nazi party, I was a member of the SS. These were really high up people that had a massive great impact in the war. And they had plans and they executed them to escape to Argentina.
Yeah.
Right? So the people who were literally just below Hitler had a plan to escape.
And all got there.
And they did.
all got there.
That's a
right?
fact.
So everybody goes, oh, how did Hitler escape? How did they escape? Because they got there. And secondly, if they all had a plan to escape to Argentina, surely Hitler did. Now, whether he carried out that and whether he executed it or whether he got stuck in Berlin, that's what's up for the debate.
Yeah.
But he definitely would have had a plan to
Yeah.
escape to Argentina.
Agreed.
And then if he went somewhere else afterwards or what have you,
It's
whatever.
the underground tunnels, it gets me. We know they exist, that's a fact.
Yeah.
They found the proof that they exist, especially from the subway tunnel to the airport in Berlin.
I think my thing is they focus on how did Hitler get out of Berlin? And people struggle to get over how he managed to get out, given the, basically, like you said, they were coming from all different angles. The Americans were coming, the Russians were coming. My argument is, what if he just wasn't in Berlin? Like I said, you've got the doubles and everything. He may not have been in. He may have made his escape weeks or even a month before the end.
So led 10 days before.
Yeah,
that
10
they
days
took the
beforehand.
bunker.
He may never have actually been there. His double may have gone in 10 days beforehand. Brilliant. They think I'm in Berlin. Brilliant. Now I'm going to go make my escape plan.
His double may have been in there for like months.
Absolutely. And then, in order to create confusion, you've got the double. If that doesn't work, we burn people over here and whatever. Because actually, technically at the time, there's no way of telling who these are. That's Hitler. Brilliant. Oh, they fell for that one. So in my view, in the answer, did Adolf Hitler really die in a bunker in Berlin? I think there's more evidence to suggest that he escaped Berlin and he ended up in Argentina than there is Because there is very little evidence to say that he died in that bunker.
I agree.
Unless you can get me that the only bit that would convince me otherwise, if you could identify independently that jawbone was definitely from him, from his dentist, and you could DNA test it.
I think personally that jawbone wasn't him.
Well, if it was given to his dentist at the time, he was probably got told to say it. He'd be
like,
exactly. It's him.
That's the point.
But
and Martin Bormann, who was his secretary, allegedly set up this elaborate plan.
But I think, you know, like we mentioned these 7 here, but there were hundreds that escaped. There was a lot.
Yeah.
And like I said, those. I mean, some of those there are like literally those 7 people are like in the top 20 most wanted Nazis in history, and they all escaped to Argentina. So why did the number 1 not escape?
Agreed.
Or if he didn't escape, he definitely had a plan to.
I think it's, from my angle, it's suspicious that it was announced on German radio in advance. I mean, all that's going to do is destroy morale if they were going to make a fighting effort of it. I think if the skull's DNA tested and both the bodies were female, it's a shame we don't have any more information about the jawbone, but that would be the only real sticking point for me. As you said, if you've got these horrendous war criminals all managing to escape to Argentina, you've got witnesses that have seen him, which is corroborated by the physical evidence of the tunnels existing. Yeah, I mean, it's entirely plausible. And
the other thing I would add as well is a handful of them obviously got brought back from Argentina and got trialled and everything else. But that was in the 60s, and according to the evidence, he was dead by then.
That's
so
one of
you
the
wouldn't
stories.
have found him. One
of the stories claim he died in 1961. And to be honest, the majority of the theories and stories that I read all say that he died 1961-62. Philip Citron's story, the old SS guy that approached the CIA, he's obviously talked about 1955. You know, that he was pictured with it. Remember, he wouldn't have lived.
I find that odd that they wouldn't investigate it.
Maybe they had bigger fish to fry at the time.
They were in Argentina though, weren't they, when they were fed the information? So maybe they just give it a Colombia, sorry. Well, maybe they just give it a backhander to. You don't know. Back
it was
then.
the Colombian CIA station at the time.
But you can imagine. I mean, there's people.
So the CIA had like a foreign office there.
Yeah, they have these pop-up kind of centres. Right. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. If there's a foreign office in that country, hey, look, if you don't investigate this. That'd be great.
We'll put it in the link on this episode, guys, as well. That particular CIA document is on the CIA website now, declassified.
We'll
put a link to it.
It's come straight from CIA.gov, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
It's not off of some random website.
It couldn't have been doctored.
We tried to be as factual as possible.
I took it straight from the horse's mouth on this occasion. So I'm going to summarise this up, because we talked about this at length. It's a really complex story. We could probably go on about this all day. I'm going to ask you the question, Spencer. Did Adolf Hitler really die in a Berlin bunker in 1945? Yes or no?
I'm unsure. I'm leaning towards no, but I need to find out more evidence about that.
Are you going undecided?
I want to find out about those teeth.
Okay.
He didn't die in Berlin.
No.
After looking into it, it's like when we looked in the previous episode, we looked at like Bob Bazaar, and then things start to come up, and you're like dead believing it, and then I'm
just that jawbone for me.
Yeah,
I want to find out what's happening with that.
Exactly, and you think about it though. If that was the only thing to prove it, why haven't they done it? They tested the skull.
The Soviets have got it, and they're not releasing it. Is the honest answer.
Really?
They've released some, but not all. Yeah.
The Soviets.
Yeah. Well, no, back then. Now Russia. I'm talking about. Yeah. So my answer to that question is no, he didn't die. I think there's more evidence that exists to suggest that he didn't die in the bunker in 1945 than that he did.
Tell you what, if you put it down to that the jaw doesn't come from him, I'm with you.
There we go.
I think that's overall.
So, guys, thanks very much for watching. Long episode, I know. A hell of a lot of detail in that one. Make sure that you
like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon, and also keep an eye out for our supplementary, where we're going to discuss the last 5 episodes.
Yes, that's
very important. Soon. So if you have any comments and bits and you put them in there, we will pick them up and we will discuss them.
Indeed. Cheers, guys. Have a good evening.